This man is clearly strong enough to take down A-rank adventurers in an instant, yet he always thought of himself as a weakling. It wasn't until he turned 30 that he decided to change careers, but his strength was so weak that he couldn't even become the lowest-ranked adventurer. As a result, after spending 2.5 years watching the strongest hero team from the sidelines, he became invincible. Now, he can defeat A-rank adventurers in an instant. One day, the protagonist unexpectedly meets his former colleague. This is because a year ago, he suddenly submitted his resignation. Then, when he heard that he wanted to become an adventurer, the girl was startled at the same time. The protagonist also knew that it was too late to become an adventurer at 30. After all, most people register as F-rank trainees in their teens. Within a year, they can level up to E-rank and become rookies. At this moment, the drunkard suddenly insisted on passing out. He insisted on taking the girl out for some fun. Seeing this, the protagonist quickly pulled him away. Little did they know, the drunkard suddenly began foaming at the mouth. The male lead thought he had just drunk too much. But later, everyone realized a handprint had appeared on the drunkard's steel armor, and he was none other than a former A-rank adventurer, wanted for crimes of violence. Meanwhile, the male lead was taking the adventurer's test. Others had magic ratings of D or C, but the male lead scored an F. Everyone laughed, saying they'd never seen someone so short before. Unexpectedly, the moment the male lead left, the crystal ball cracked. Then they were going to attack the slime punching bag to measure their attack power. The male lead immediately recalled a painful memory. His senior had taught him that the body is the foundation of true strength. As long as he could destroy this golden slime punching bag with his fists, it would mean he had cultivated a body he could trust. The protagonist is truly impressed. After all, the golden slime is as tough as dragon teeth. How could it be destroyed with just a punch? Little does he know, the senior can casually destroy 200 of them with one punch. Since the protagonist is a beginner, he only needs to strike 50,000 times on the first day. But for him, it's already like hell. For an average person, it's just enhancing physical attacks. You'll get a pretty good score. Then it was the turn of a blonde-haired Ishing. The crowd buzzed with discussion. He is the rumored second son of the Duke. A child prodigy who possesses magic comparable to a C-class mage at only 11 years old. The main character was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe that was a third-order fire magic just now. It's because he was rigorously trained by his seniors. What he saw was yet another version. It's still the same scorching magic. The scale is like night and day. The male protagonist naively thought this was the other side's intentionally compressed indoor version. Truly a child genius. Once he understood, even green slime has excellent shock absorption properties. When he took the stage, the examiner learned that he had switched careers at the age of 30. He was long past the best time to become stronger. In fact, his magic power measurement results were also very poor. Therefore, I sincerely advise him to give up as soon as possible. However, he persevered through 50,000 punches. There's no reason to give up here. You can start being an adventurer at any age. It's only right that you can experience new things no matter how old you are. Then the male lead punched the sandbag to smithereens. Those who had mocked him earlier were instantly slapped in the face. The blonde-haired guy was unhappy about being upstaged. He planned to use his defensive magic to show the male lead who's boss. But the fourth-order magic, which even he couldn't fully defend against, was completely blocked by the male lead. Even more unbelievable, he used only first-order magic. Seeing this, the examiner decided to attack with even stronger fifth-order magic. He told the male lead to show his true skills. The male lead felt ashamed. He only knew one type of first-order magic, whether attacking or defending. He only knew one type of first-order magic. But he said it wasn't a big problem. It should be fine, based on the intensity just now. At this time, Deng Chi-er, who was nearby, happened to see a loud boom inside the examination hall that didn't sound like a test. So he came to inquire about the situation. But he only saw the examiner, who had already become reclusive. He learned that an F-rank adventurer had single-handedly knocked away a green slime punching bag. And he blocked a fifth-order spell with a first-order spell. He thought it was just the latest joke circulating in the guild. Until he saw that the protagonist is 32 years old today. He had been working as a counter-clerk at a branch of the guild. The knights were stunned. Could it be that counter-clerk is a special title for a dragon-slaying hero? The male lead is confident he can score full marks in the first stage written exam. After all, he's an old hand at the front desk. The only thing he's worried about is his practical exam results. Because his magic power is only rated F. Lynette believes he'll be just fine. He's made incredible progress over the past 2.5 years. The Duke's second son suddenly starts causing trouble for the male lead. The male lead thinks he's just lost his way. He promised to help him find his family. The second son was unhappy. He wanted to use this exam to show everyone his talent and make a grand debut. But the main character was even more eye-catching. The second son's sister thought her brother was made to cry by the main character. The second son is being dishonest. He said he was bullied by that 40-something-year-old man. The main character absolutely cannot tolerate that. He's clearly only in his early 30s. The girl with twin tails, annoyed, takes off one glove and throws it at him, challenging him to a duel. The male lead instinctively picks up the glove. He even criticizes her, calling her a spoiled noble girl. He doesn't know how hard it is to do laundry, but he doesn't realize that picking up the glove means accepting the duel. The girl with twin tails introduces herself as a second-class Knight of the Kingdom Knights. She's going to punish the male lead, this 40-something-year-old man. According to the kingdom's dueling rules, everyone can make a request as a wager. The twin-tailed girl wants the loser to serve the winner as a servant until death. At this moment, the protagonist still doesn't understand what a second-tier knight is. Lynette explains that it's equivalent to a B-rank adventurer. The protagonist is shocked. Even B-rank adventurers can take down high-level monsters alone. But he's just a rookie who's barely made it to F-rank. The protagonist seriously doubts whether he'll survive to leave. Lynette made him recall the training over the past 2.5 years. Instead, it almost caused him to mentally break down on the spot. Lynette urged the protagonist to show confidence. After all, he was one of the members of the strongest team on the continent. The girl with twin tails underestimated the protagonist, who was ultimately just a low-level adventurer. Thus, she promised to spare his life. The girl with twin tails specializes in enhancing her body and weapons. She was curious to see if the protagonist could keep up with her speed. In an instant, she appeared behind the male lead. As a greeting gift, she deliberately held back, not directly attacking him. Seeing the male lead remain silent, the younger brother boasted about his older sister's incredible speed. That's why everyone calls her the Flash, but she wouldn't hold back next time. Unbeknownst to her, in the male lead's eyes, the twin-tailed girl's speed was like slow motion. It's even much slower than how he usually runs, so she doesn't understand why he's called the Flash. She watches as the male lead easily dodges the attack. The twin-tailed girl doesn't believe the male lead can react to her speed. After all, even among the first-class knights, few could do that. She can only attribute it to the male lead's good luck. But with the second attack, the male lead still thinks it's too slow. She didn't expect that such a level of speed could make him a second-class knight. He thought she got into the knights through connections, or that she was actually quite strong. The male lead was completely stunned. He couldn't predict her movements at all just now, and she even thinks she's strong. She's incredibly arrogant. The twin-tailed girl tries to get away with it. Since that's the case, she'll use a move that puts a lot of strain on her body next. I can only use high-speed movement 3 times a day. Unfortunately, 3 times the speed of a turtle is still just 3 times the speed of a turtle. The male lead dodged my high-speed movements twice in a row. Now the twin-tailed girl feels a little uneasy. As the smoke cleared, the male lead had punched a deep hole in the ground. The twin-tailed girl was shocked. If she hadn't been tripped just now, that punch would have landed on her. Seeing the male lead was going all out, the twin-tailed girl immediately raised her hands in surrender. She stubbornly claimed the male lead had won. High-pitched and virtuous, the male lead, however, brought up the bet. He intended to collect the bet according to the twin-tailed girl's request. Lynette reminds everyone that the time to announce the results is almost here. Not only that, Brosdown and the others are coming over soon. A man never expected that even the toughest guy would have a shy moment. It turns out that just now, the results of the first phase of the adventurer exam were about to be announced. The admission ticket glowing blue means passing. But the male protagonist has no confidence in himself at all. Gentle Lynette knows how to comfort people. She thinks the male lead will definitely be fine. This makes the male lead overjoyed. If only he were 10 years younger. But unexpectedly, Lynette has a twist. If it comes to the worst, if he fails, he just needs to triple his training. That's it. Failing is a dead end. Unexpectedly, as soon as she finished speaking, the male lead's exam admission ticket suddenly glows with blue light, indicating that he is eligible to participate in tomorrow's second phase mock battle exam. Just as he leaves, he smells a strange, unpleasant odor. A flashy guy with yellow hair approaches and tries to hit on Lynette. He is the eldest son of Duke d'Armwood's family. He wants to know Lynette's name. The male lead thinks the guy is also an exam candidate, so he introduces himself. But he was rejected because the other side wasn't interested in getting to know a middle-aged man. The guy with the yellow hair started to use his self-assumed charming, cheesy pickup lines. He had lost a valuable item. The guy with the yellow hair is really something. He hopes Lynette will be his second wife. The male lead quickly stepped in between them to protect her, and lied, claiming that Lynette was his girlfriend. The guy with the yellow hair scoffed, "You?" until they saw the male lead's admission ticket. Then came another round of laughter. His age, yet he's still a probationary F-class. The male lead retorted that the blonde-haired guy didn't look young either. He also started late. The blonde-haired guy sneered, calling him a third-rate loser. He had already reached E-class at 14. Now, he's not only a top-tier A-class agent, but also an examiner for the second phase simulation war. Seeing that the blonde guy was still pestering her, Lynette took the initiative to get close to the male lead and said they were dating. Therefore, she wasn't interested in the blonde guy. The scent of his perfume was too strong and unpleasant. The blonde guy was narrow-minded and started to hate the male lead. If he were the male lead's examiner tomorrow, he would make the male lead understand the difference between them. By then, Lynette would definitely know who to choose. The male lead is really stunned. People driven by hormones are really not to be messed with. Then, realizing they were still close together, the male lead suddenly jumped back and apologized. He had claimed to be her boyfriend without permission. Lynette felt happy instead. Thanks to him, she was able to shake off the annoying guy. A tough guy acting shy, this is too much. Little did they know, Yellowhead is an extremist nobleman. He believes commoners should grovel at his feet. The younger brother and sister suddenly burst into the room, the aggressor accusing first. Today, he was bullied by a commoner in his 40s during the exam. He was almost subjected to humiliation under the pretext of a dual oath. Now Yellowhead's boss is truly enraged. Daring to make the noble Diremud cry is unforgivable. He suddenly remembered the male protagonist's appearance, so he confirmed with his sister-in-law that it was indeed him. The next day, during the mock battle exam, Lynette asked the male protagonist to go easy on him. The male protagonist didn't have confidence in himself. He believed he wouldn't be able to hold back even a little. If the examiner was that yellow-haired guy from yesterday, it would be over. But unexpectedly, a man in a suit came over and greeted him. It turned out that the man in the suit was the protagonist's examiner, simply because they heard that the male lead, at age 30, switched from being a counter-worker to an adventurer. The examiner greatly admired the male lead's determination. The male lead's existence also greatly encouraged the examiner, who is also middle-aged. It turned out that he also only started being an adventurer in his 20s. He's like the male lead, although he's now over 40. To realize his dream, he must reach A rank. Although right now he's only B rank. The examiner suggested they go for a drink after the exam. Little did they know, Yellowhead was eavesdropping around the corner. The moment the two separated, Wang Mao found the examiner and played a dirty trick. Soon after, the male lead received a notice from the guild. Their examiner suddenly fell ill. Therefore, Yellowhead was appointed as a replacement. Lynette analyzed the surname. Yellowhead and yesterday's Yellowhead are likely siblings. The male lead felt utterly hopeless and doomed. The other candidates are equally worried. Although the guy with the yellow hair is a genius, he also has a title, F-Class Terminator. He enjoys toying with the candidates every year. Since learning that the guy with the yellow hair became an examiner, the protagonist's anxiety has reached its peak. He's just a rookie who only knows 2 first-tier spells. How could he possibly be a genius and an opponent on A-class level? Now it's good. Failing the exam is death. Failing will also result in death by triple the training. The male lead has no confidence at all. After all, he started later than others. He's also been told by many people that it's impossible. Lynette, however, intends to do the opposite. Since he can be swayed by others' words, he can also be inspired to confidence by others' words. Lynette always believed he would pass the exam and win over that perfumed man. It was destined from the day he decided to become an adventurer. The male lead finally regained his confidence because of this. Unexpectedly, a suspicious fortune teller, seeing his young age but weary appearance, offered to give him a free reading. The male lead, believing it, sat down in the chair. Before Lynette could react, he completely vanished before her eyes. The fortune teller stopped pretending. It was just the little yellow-haired boy in disguise. Lynette immediately took action and asked where the male lead had been teleported to. The little yellow-haired boy was about to retort, but his eyelashes were cut off. "If you don't speak, next time it'll be your eyes." The little yellow-haired boy was scared and confessed. Even though he's a genius, he can only teleport 100 meters, so he's nearby. At this moment, the male lead had already arrived behind the exam hall. A group of people suddenly appeared, with hostile intentions. They claim to be D'Armwood's personal guard. They intend to prevent the male lead from taking the exam today. They want to stop me. Isn't this a little too shameless? It's not about stopping you, it's about extrajudicial punishment. Damn your brother. The weakest person here is at least a B-class. The protagonist has nowhere left to run. But then, his powerful senior also finds him. His face turns ashen. It's all over. To protect the group of thugs, he lies, saying they're warming up for him. Seeing this, Broxton also wants to help. The protagonist panics and urges them to retreat, but they refuse to listen. The bald man swung a large knife at Broxton, but unexpectedly, the blade shattered on impact. Broxton assessed that his wrist strength enhancement was acceptable, but neglecting weapon enhancement wouldn't do. The bald man, not giving up, continued with a normal punch. However, the gap between them was too vast. In an instant, his entire hand was crushed. Broxton reassured him. Then he used magic to heal the bald guy. The bodyguard's minions were shocked. They had never seen a beast man who could speak and use magic. The dwarves and elves knew the protagonist was being targeted, so they planned to help him solve it peacefully. Saying that, they pulled out their newly developed weapon. At this moment, the leader finally recognized these people, but the minor characters remained unaware. He was still planning to use the red-haired girl nearby to threaten everyone. The girl was curious about what they were doing. The male protagonist was dumbfounded. He explained that the other person just wanted to play with her. The extra was scared silly. With just a sigh, she used 7th order magic. Because she is a 10-year-old super genius magician vampire, Alice, nicknamed the Child of Destruction. The other one is a half-elf, half-dwarf. They can use technology that seems to be from 1,000 years in the future. Praised as the world's most formidable weapons workshop. Known in the martial world as the Millennium Workshop, Midabot. And lastly, this being, both a creature of immense strength and possessing intelligence, able to use any supporting magic, the wise ghost, Broxton. They are all legendary S-rank adventurers, humanoid monsters with combat abilities beyond common sense. The team leader's eyes were clear and filled with excitement. He could see these big shots with his own eyes. This made him decide to retire and enjoy his remaining years. Meanwhile, the young man with blonde hair was being held by his collar. He couldn't go anywhere until the male lead returned. The young man with blonde hair panicked. The place where the male lead was teleported to had his family's personal guard. Unexpectedly, before he could finish speaking, the male lead suddenly appeared. Soon, the original examiner, badly injured, found him. He had been attacked by Yellowhead. Yellowhead had asked him about his dreams. The examiner hoped to build a school in his hometown for children who wanted to be adventurers, but he was scorned by Yellowhead. Third-rate trash only teaches third-rate things. The examiner was unwilling to accept this, but couldn't refute it. He advised the main character to forfeit. Otherwise, things will definitely become worse than his. The male lead, however, believes that it's never too late to start learning something new, no matter how old you are. This time, he was really angry. He swore that no matter what, he would make that bastard pay the price. The man never dreamed that with just 1/10,000,000th of his magic power, he could defeat the exceptionally talented blonde examiner. Little did he know, his strength was already on par with S rank. Just because of a single sentence from his master, he has been unable to have a correct understanding of himself. That's amazing. A person's strength is determined by 4 fundamental attributes. As a famously gifted magic user, the blonde's magical power is maxed out. Although Lynette thinks the male protagonist will definitely have no problem dealing with him, the blonde is notoriously ill-tempered. Relying on his A-rank strength, he always uses excessive force, finding pleasure in beating the examinees. But the several masters aren't worried at all. They see that the male lead can appear on the battlefield unscathed. The blonde-haired man acts tough, unlike him and his subordinates. Little does he know, one can tell just by watching. The male lead asks him what his reason for being an adventurer is. For him, becoming a high-ranking adventurer is merely a means to increase his value. So I've already decided to find a chance to resign. I'm tired of bullying newcomers anyway. The male protagonist made up his mind after hearing this. He couldn't lose to someone like him, no matter what. The blonde-haired boy scoffed at this. He just thought he was all talk, as the exam began. The blonde-haired boy used a first-order spell as an example, but he saw that the male protagonist dared to remain motionless. To avoid being overwhelmed by anger, he needed to stay absolutely calm. It was all because Lynette gave him advice before the competition. Within 2.5 minutes of the exam starting, he only needed to stay calm and focus on observing his opponent. Although the male lead was scared, he had 100% trust in Lynette. Immediately afterward, the blonde-haired boy used a third-order flame magic spell, a chantless version. In an instant, the male lead was engulfed in a sea of fire, but unexpectedly, it was all bark and no bite. Not even a hair on his head was singed. Because this little trick, for the male lead, wasn't even an attack. Broxton explained to Elisa the 4 fundamental attributes that directly affect an adventurer's strength: physical strength, body control, magical power, and magic control. If you don't train your magical power early, it will be difficult to increase it after the age of 20. The male protagonist, because he didn't switch to being an adventurer until he was 30, can only take the path of body cultivation. His initial training only required him to run to the neighboring village. This seemingly simple training involved wearing 100 kilograms iron balls on each foot. Not only that, but this place is also a nest of carnivorous monsters. Hurry up, or you'll be killed. To compensate for his lack of magical power, the male protagonist had to make up for it in 3 other areas. He trained his physical strength from scratch. Might was responsible for his magic control. Despite hating trouble, he actually taught him for a whole year. Might had no choice. The male protagonist had to learn magic defense. Finally, Lynette was responsible for his body control. Elisa was surprised, thinking she was just an ordinary maid. Little did she know that being a maid was just her hobby. The male lead didn't disappoint. He diligently caught up on all his training. Now he's also reached the S-rank level, but in the blonde's eyes, the male lead is just relatively durable, and he himself is not aware of this. It's simply because the male lead didn't shatter the giant rock with one punch. But Broston said even an F-rank adventurer could shatter it. The blonde-haired man hasn't stopped attacking. But the main character hasn't been knocked down. Now the blonde-haired man is furious and wants to finish him off himself. At this moment, the main character finally understands Lynette's intention. He has discovered that the blonde-haired man only possesses innate magical power, but is otherwise completely inept. The main character is confident he can defeat him. The blonde-haired man is enraged. He recited the magic spell completely for the first time. The power of his magic was even greater than before. But unexpectedly, the male lead easily caught it with just one hand. That casually condensed magic of the blonde-haired guy. He didn't even need to use magic defense. It was because the male lead had just used ultra-high precision condensed magical defense. And he only used 1/10,000th of the blonde-haired guy's amount. The blonde-haired guy thought the male lead was just lucky. After saying that, he closed in again and threw a punch. But for the male lead, the speed was far too slow. Faced with the male lead's counterattack, the blonde immediately used defensive magic to avoid being beaten to a pulp. He finally realized the male lead's strength was more than just a rank, and he used the excuse that he'd tested too many people and was tired. Plus, a series of coincidences had allowed the male lead to be lucky enough to still be standing. The male lead was truly impressed. He just used body control that isn't even magic. It's just that the precision far surpasses the blonde's enhancement magic. The blonde questions the old man. How can he become so strong within a year? The male protagonist's face instantly darkens. Because he can't leave the dragon's lair unless he defeats the dragon. He ran a marathon amidst the chain explosions. And he swam in the monster capture fluid until he nearly suffocated. Just listening to it makes you feel like you'd die 1,000 times. In fact, that's true, but as long as you haven't been dead for too long, you can be brought back to life with magic. It's precisely because the body keeps being destroyed and repaired that he becomes so strong. To feel the flow of the wind, the protagonist is thrown off cliffs countless times, and must also spar with the magic child Alice using first-tier magic. The trick is to utilize the weight of the falling objects. I see. This isn't really a matter of tricks, is it? The blonde still doesn't believe it. To persevere through such brutal training, what is he using as his mental support? But unexpectedly, his mental support is his dream. His dream is to defeat the world's strongest monster, Caesar. The blonde boy let out a mocking laugh. This was because it was the ultimate demon in adventure stories. It was also the final goal of the male protagonist's masters. The male protagonist didn't care about the blonde boy's mockery. Anyway, it had nothing to do with him. The blonde boy had enough of the male protagonist's nonsense. He cast a 7th tier spell to trap the male protagonist in place. Next, he was going to use his strongest spell. He's going to use the 8th order magic, the highest level currently available to humans. It's also his strongest magic as a master of 1,000 spells. Soon, the blonde transforms into a giant plant creature. But the protagonist is still using the most basic magic. He asks the blonde how many times he's actually used this 8th order magic. The blonde boasts about being a genius. He says he learned it without using it many times. Little does he know, the protagonist has used it over 100 million times. Everyone couldn't confirm whether it was true or false. But physically speaking, it's definitely impossible. However, it's possible using special spacetime magic. Afterwards, the male lead saw his masters waiting for him. He didn't expect that he seemed to be a little strong. Why hadn't he noticed before? But it was all thanks to his master's help. The blonde was very unwilling to accept his defeat. The male lead knew what he was thinking. How could he, a genius, lose to someone who started later? But he didn't know that the male lead only focused on the techniques he needed, and he honed that one technique to perfection. Therefore, he advised the blonde-haired man to focus on one technique first. This was sincere advice from a senior adventurer, a senior in life. The blonde-haired man no longer planned to quit his job. He will be the male leads examiner in the next promotion exam. At 32 and a half, he finally realized his dream. He became a true adventurer. Because of this, he thought back to how difficult the journey had been. Ever since he read the legend of Yamato and the adventure story, he believed that by defeating the ultimate demon king, Caesar would gain a treasure that could grant any wish. That's when the male lead started thinking about becoming an adventurer. But his parents worried it was a dangerous job where he could die at any moment. They still believed he should aim for a stable, respectable job, until he discovered he possessed a hereditary aptitude for a skill. He didn't know what the skill was, but the possibility of becoming an adventurer presented itself. It wasn't something that would awaken through training, though. He could only wait and see. Once it awakened, he could confidently tell his parents. He wanted to become an adventurer, but he didn't expect to wait for so many years. His companions comforted him, saying many others with similar talent hadn't awakened their abilities. There are plenty of adventurers without skills. He also heard that adventurers can make a lot of money. But for the protagonist, being an adventurer wasn't about making money. Ultimately, the protagonist became a receptionist at the Adventurers Guild. His parents were very happy about this. The male lead repeats his monotonous work day after day. During this time, he also tries to expect his skills to awaken. But until he became a veteran of the guild, his companions had married and had children, the male lead's life remained unchanged. He reminds his juniors that monsters have recently appeared in the town. It seems they strayed into the human town after being driven from their nests. Therefore, extra caution is needed. Hey-Gu is showing off to him now that he's become a B-rank adventurer. Now he can finally make a living as an adventurer. The protagonist is incredibly envious. For 14 years, he's been sitting in the same seat, doing the same work. Although his life and income are stable, there's nothing to complain about. Suddenly, a woman's scream is heard nearby. A mid-level monster, a giant mountain troll, had actually invaded the town. Seeing Lynette approach the troll, the male protagonist, without a second thought, stepped forward to shield her. Unexpectedly, Lynette told him to stand down. Then, in the blink of an eye, she killed the troll. It was then that he learned Lynette was also an adventurer. He felt ashamed. He had intended to be a hero and save the damsel, but instead became a bear needing rescuing by a beauty. She looks incredibly strong. Could she be a B-rank adventurer? Lynette's denial shocked him even more. Could she be A-rank? This was his first time seeing an adventurer fight up close. A-rank really is strong, but she's not A-rank either. Then she produced an S-rank badge, proving her strength. This completely stunned the male lead. S-rank adventurers are so powerful, they aren't registered with the guild. They're top-tier existences directly managed by headquarters. The male lead instantly felt embarrassed. Taking this opportunity, he wanted to ask a question, hoping Lynette wouldn't laugh at him. Little did he know, Lynette hadn't laughed once in the 9 years since she was 8. The male lead confesses his lifelong dream was to become an adventurer and defeat Caesar. He also has a unique skill he's never activated. Is it feasible for him, now 30 years old, to start his career as an adventurer? After what just happened, Lynette recognizes that he possesses the most important quality for an adventurer, courage. But since he works at the guild, he must know about the matter of magical power. The male lead thought that if he didn't exercise while young, it would be difficult to grow. The truth is, he would almost never grow. Considering that adventurers need a certain level of magical power, Lynette could only objectively state that the male lead's chances of successfully changing jobs to become an adventurer were 0. Since he was told this by a top-tier adventurer, the male lead could finally give up on this dream he'd clung to for decades. But meeting such an amazing girl wasn't a loss. He half-jokingly asked her out to dinner next time. To his surprise, Lynette didn't refuse. She was free tomorrow anyway. The male lead didn't expect happiness to come so suddenly. He was energetic all day the next day. Being able to have dinner with such a cute girl, life seemed full of hope again. If things went well, he might even get a girlfriend. But monsters appeared in the city again. The male lead is truly exasperated. No matter how you look at it, things have been unusually abnormal lately. Then he found Lynette, who was fighting monsters. Faced with the monsters that continued to approach relentlessly, Lynette told him to go to a safe place first. The male lead wasn't foolish. Knowing he would only get in the way, he decisively moved away. The male lead was completely dumbfounded. S-class strength is truly terrifying. It didn't take long for Lynette to defeat all the monsters before her. But the next moment, she recalled the tragic events of her childhood. Her internal magic suddenly went berserk, and she lost her fighting ability. At a critical moment, Black Brother and his people appeared to provide support. Watching everyone's brave fighting stances, the male protagonist, who had intended to give up, felt quite envious. Lynette, however, told them to leave immediately. Just one B-rank adventurer is far from enough, because a dragon has appeared nearby. It turns out her body shows symptoms similar to trauma, but upon contact with the dragon's magic. The male lead was just about to say how could a dragon be in such a rural place, when a shadow enveloped him the next moment. Sure enough, a dragon appeared in the sky. Only then did everyone understand. The monsters came here to escape from the dragon. Adventurer Tai Zhe was dissatisfied. An A-rank adventurer should retreat immediately when encountering a dragon. However, in a moment of panic, the mage instinctively attacked, drawing the dragon's attention. In the blink of an eye, everyone was sent flying by the dragon. Realizing they were no match for it, they immediately turned to flee. But to their surprise, the area around them had already been sealed by the dragon's barrier. With B-class power, breaking through is impossible. The giant dragon clearly intends to kill them. The male protagonist suddenly walks in front of the dragon. Anyway, continuing like this will only lead to pointless deaths. If I stand up and fight, I can at least die like an adventurer. Even if this isn't a fair fight, a single touch from the dragon would pulverize me. At this moment, the male protagonist feels his blood boiling. This is the life he's always wanted. It's just that the male lead's fighting ability is really weak. Seeing that even the counter clerk dares to charge in, what else is there for them to be afraid of? It's a pity that against a dragon, ordinary fighting strength is simply ineffective. After the dragon's flames, no one in the arena can fight anymore. Lynette blames herself, saying that if she could fight, it wouldn't have come to this. Then the male lead rises again from the ruins. But the next moment, he was slapped down by the giant dragon. However, between life and death, the male protagonist finally awakened his inherent skill. He single-handedly supported the dragon's claw. Magic, visible to the naked eye, emanated from his body. It was the perfect opportunity to try his new skill on the giant dragon. The male protagonist never expected that his skill would be so incredibly powerful. But before he could celebrate, he fainted. He didn't wake up again until 2.5 weeks later. All the magic circuits in his body were destroyed. He was like a dead man. But miraculously, he recovered while he was unconscious. Lynette stayed by his side the whole time. She only wanted to invite him to join her adventurers group, because he and they shared the same goal. They both wanted to defeat the ultimate monster, Caesar. It turned out that Caesar was real, and the male lead, who can fight simply with courage. I'm sure he can become stronger and fight alongside them, even starting now. Lynette now believes that the male lead will definitely become an adventurer. The male lead wept with joy. It was the first time in his life that someone had said that to him. Sure enough, after 2.5 years of arduous training, the male lead finally achieved his childhood dream. He became a real adventurer through the test. The man finally understands why one needs to be fully armed when visiting the protagonist's home. It's because of a little girl he casually met, who could casually cast a 6th tier magic. If it weren't for the protagonist quickly deflecting the spell, he would have probably died on the spot as soon as he walked in. The male lead is truly exasperated. I've told you 23,000 times not to play magic in the castle. Alice is shifting the blame, saying the male lead hasn't been playing with her lately. However, every dog has its day. Lynette stated she'll deduct the repair costs from her meal allowance. The male lead, resigned, can only play with Alice for a while, lest she cause more trouble. Larat, however, is allowed to freely tour the castle. It just so happened that he saw, in the open space outside the window, the dwarf elf calibrating his newest weapon. At first, he thought that what might held was merely a handcrafted item, until he was allowed to handle it himself, and, following instructions, inject magic and pull the trigger. The projectile launched, obliterating the distant scarecrow. Its terrifying power greatly shocked Rorat. Once mass-produced, it would overturn the course of warfare across the entire world. Then he noticed an orc in his study. Broxton sensed a guest outside, so he invited them in, saying it was fine, because this was his room and study. Surrounded by books like this, he could relax more, and he'd read almost all the books here. It's just that lately he's been helping the male lead train, leading to more and more unread books. Learning that the male lead's training was mainly conducted by Broston, Lorit became very interested, hoping to offer some guidance. And in his eyes, there was the same light as the male lead. Afterwards, Mybowert told the male lead that Lorit excitedly followed Broston to the forest. The male lead started to panic. Why would he do such a thing? Lorit fell off a cliff and found out beneath him lay a huge monster with its legs in the air. Lynette below Warcraft is holding up with one hand to explain this is what they have for tonight. See this familiar one? Lynette roughly knew what happened. Just now Broxton asked him to rush down the steep slope of the cliff. Unexpectedly, he was pushed down before he had time to mentally build himself up. If Lynette hadn't been here, he would have likely died. Lynette, however, was used to it. After all, Broxton was the one who killed the male lead the most times. The older brother originally planned to pretend he hadn't heard anything, but Broxton still found him. He was forcibly dragged away again for more training. Only after the training ended did he feel how good it was to be alive. He didn't expect Broxton's easy workout to be anything but easy. Little did I know that within this castle, there are 3 great lies you absolutely cannot believe. Broxton's easy workout, Alice's I won't do it again, and MIT's I'll be serious. The others didn't acknowledge it, though. Anyway, as long as we resurrect him like we usually do, it's fine. Alice also wants to play with Rorit, but was ruthlessly rejected by the male lead. Otherwise, he would have turned to ashes. My boat blames the male lead. Since he expected things to turn out this way, the male lead, who invited him to the castle, is also at fault. Laurette, now back to her normal self, starts gossiping. Lynette clearly seems like a good girl. She's curious about what stage the male lead and she have reached, but the male lead feels he's an old man in his 30s, not good enough for her. Little does he know, Laurot's wife is 20 years younger than him. The key is timing. As long as their hearts are connected, age is not a problem. So, during dinner, everyone wanted seconds and thirds. Seeing Lynette leave to prepare, the older brother quickly reminded him, the time is right. Be quick and help her. You might be able to close the distance in one go. He is very interested in the protagonist's innate skill. But little did he know, the protagonist's innate skill is condition-based, and the conditions for activation are beyond the protagonist's control. Even so, the protagonist has already reached the S-rank level. If his skill, Brave Awakening, were triggered, his power could even surpass that of others. Afterward, Broxton also has something he wants to ask him. He wants to know if the protagonist is aware of the 6 magical stones called the Infinity Gems. He knew it was an artifact from the Yamato legend. Their goal was to gather the Infinity Stones and defeat the ultimate monster. Legend said that gathering the stones would open the gate to its slumbering place, and the magic stones become active in 200-year cycles. Now is the active period for the stones. They should be releasing a large amount of magical power. Unfortunately, he hadn't heard any news about this, but he promised he would inquire with the department handling non-public, classified information. Soon, the 3 male protagonists arrived at the guild to accept a commission, but they were refused by the guild master. A white-haired person passing by was surprised. He had never seen a talking beast man before. Such a strange combination, a little girl and an inconspicuous old man. The guild master, although aware of their considerable strength, knew the 3 didn't meet the requirements for accepting the commission. The regulations stipulated that the team must consist of 4 members, including at least 2 A-rank adventurers. And conveniently, Ray over there mentioned wanting to take on a high-difficulty commission. This is a perfect opportunity. You agreed? That's great. Wait, I did say I wanted to take on and I'm happy to repel monsters, but are you the helper? Ray mistook the male lead and Alice for rookies, so she readily agreed to lend them a hand. According to the information given by Laurette, Infinity Stones may appear at their destination. Ray boasted that nothing happened if she was here. She can easily defeat any monster, although she is only F-rated now. But you can climb to level A in an instant. I learned that the male protagonist has just reached E level. Let Ray confirm that the male protagonist is just an ordinary uncle. At this moment, a strange phenomenon appeared in the sky. This indicates that a great treasure is about to be born. However, nearby, flying dragons were spotted. Lei was scared. This is bad. Even one of them could be deadly. If it calls for its companions, everyone will die, unless they have a plan in advance. But if they had to say Broxton's plan was to fight any monster he saw, the girl despaired. He's only going to attract more wyverns this way. Little did she know, Broxton intentionally didn't instantly kill the wyverns. He found Ray annoying. So the male lead took Ray and left. Was he trying to harm her? The male lead was confused. Didn't she say she was strong? But she was only talking about future plans. Suddenly, a wyvern crashed from afar. The wyverns in the forest were mercilessly slaughtered at that moment. Just as Ray was stunned, the male lead suddenly stepped in and saved her. This is a being that even an A-rank adventurer couldn't handle. Ray suggested a quick retreat. She still had some things she wanted to confirm, but Ray chose to stay and fight. Even as a temporary team, they are teammates. If it were Yamato, he would absolutely never abandon his companions. Seeing this, the male lead tells Ray to provide support. Release it. First order magic. Amazing. I'm really strong. Why are you telling me to run? Why did you call me for backup again? Afterwards, everyone successfully found the reality gem in the dragon's lair. The gem was filled with incredible magical power. If we can make this power resonate, we can locate the other gems. They successfully found the location of the second gem, which was the closest to them. It was in a major city famous for its fighting tournaments and renowned for its grand arenas. The woman feels incredibly embarrassed at this moment. It's because she was about to get up but unexpectedly tripped and fell. She thought it was just because she had been too tense, so she was preparing to try again. But to her surprise, she tripped again for no reason. At this point, she finally confirms that it wasn't her mistake earlier. It was the male lead playing tricks. It turns out that the male lead had just used a new move he learned in the past 2 months. Opening leg sweep, one of the 8 extraordinary techniques of Spare No Mercy. It's specifically designed to repeatedly sweep the legs of an opponent trying to stand up, thus crushing their will. A masterful technique. No matter how many times it's used, it won't cause excessive damage. Finally, after repeatedly being knocked down, the male lead made her cry. She couldn't understand. Ever since the male lead defeated her and her siblings 2.5 months ago, she had traveled hundreds of kilometers alone to the fighter's kingdom to train and become stronger. Why would they meet the male lead again? It's because after the male lead's team obtained the reality stone, they then detected a second infinity stone right here. Unexpectedly, as soon as the 3 arrived, they encountered thugs harassing a vulnerable beast girl, forcing her to go with them for a quick study session. Worried someone might get hurt, the male lead tried to stop them, but Broston beat him to it. The thugs were unhappy about being interrupted. He is a fighter, but he doesn't seem that strong. Lu Mian got angry and had Broston go with him, but what he didn't expect was to walk in and be dragged out. The male lead was speechless, but the victim still appeared. After taking a beating, the bald man quickly became obedient. The male lead took out the reality stone and asked if they had seen anything like it. Both of them felt like they had seen it before, but I just can't remember exactly where. Broxton didn't mind. Any clue, no matter how small, could tell him. Suddenly, the 3 of them were surrounded by a crowd. It was a parade announcing the upcoming King of the Ring tournament, a competition to decide who is the strongest fighter. The man before them, Kelvin, who had already achieved 3 consecutive victories, was charging towards a 4th consecutive win. He's the idol all fighters aspire to, just from afar. But Broxton could also confirm that the opponent must be extraordinarily skilled. Soon, they both exclaimed in surprise. Following the direction of the beast-eared girl's finger, they only then noticed the boxing champion's belt wrapped around his waist, with similar yellow gems inlaid on it. Broxton instantly recognized that those were the sole gems they needed. The 3 of them quickly went straight to his door. Kelvin's eyes narrowed instantly. Broxton's style was always blunt and to the point. He believed Kelvin would be the same, so he directly asked him to hand over the golden belt. Broxton stated that what he wanted were the gems embedded in it. Those were the belongings of all the members of his team. As compensation, he would also prepare gems of equal or greater value in exchange. Seeing a few people being treated as robbers and being about to be driven out, Kelvin spoke up and asked the curator to wait. He believed that Broston wasn't lying, because his nose could detect the scent of a lie. But believing doesn't mean agreeing. After all, this golden belt is special to the country. Even if their goal is only the jewels, it can't be handed over easily. The only way to obtain the belt is to reach the top of the competition. Broxton never does things half-heartedly. They will participate in this competition. The curator was still dissatisfied and thought he should call his disciple to teach them a lesson. Little did he know, it was a good thing he didn't do that. Otherwise, everyone present might not have made it out alive. First, there's that maid. Just by watching her every move, you can tell she's definitely a skilled expert. As for the male lead, he seems inconspicuous. Although I possess a body honed through countless trials, I lack the domineering aura characteristic of a strong warrior. Most dangerous of all is that orc, a truly formidable opponent. Brosson decided to play by the rules. He and the protagonist will both compete, in separate tournaments held in the East and West respectively. He has already arranged for guides. It's the bald guy who was beaten into submission before. First, to participate, you must pass the assessment and become a fighter. His opponent will be randomly selected from the rookie fighters. Currently, his opponent is undefeated in the preliminary rounds. The examiner comforts him, saying that winning or losing isn't the key. As long as he has the necessary skills, he can pass. But he never expected to meet the blonde twin-tailed girl here. Both of them are idiots, and this karmic bond is continuing. Now, Angia already has a lot of male fans. They must watch every match she competes in. After all, Angia is a beautiful girl fighter who appeared like a comet. The only unfortunate thing is that she's from a small village. At this moment, both the male lead and Angia don't understand why the other is here. The male lead even thinks his 2 brothers are here too. Little does he know, Angia is here alone. Angia knew the situation was dire. After all, The male lead had even defeated his own A-class brother. Even if the outcome didn't matter, she didn't want to suffer a defeat here. Although the male lead still seemed weak, she wouldn't be as careless as before. She planned to go all out from the start. Anjia thought it was because she was too nervous and decided to try again. But she inexplicably fell again. This time, she knew it wasn't her mistake. It must have been the male lead. He used one of his 8 wonder techniques, a sweeping leg. It specifically targets the opponent's lower body to break their will without causing injury. Simply put, it's an incredibly fast sweeping leg. Anjia couldn't believe it, she couldn't even see the speed. Although she wanted to say the move was ridiculous. But it's really possible that the 40-something-year-old man in front of me could do it. Therefore, I must keep my distance from him. It's a pity, but I still couldn't avoid being swept away. The male lead's Versailles-like quick footwork is truly impressive. Trying to seize the opportunity to interrupt wasn't easy. Anjia's unwillingness to lose. She won't give up at this level. Afterwards, Anjia found the male lead again to complain. Why would that 40-something-year-old man appear here? How many times do you have to humiliate her before you're satisfied? The male lead was shocked. You can't say things like that, little sister. As an apology, he took Anjia out to dinner. The restaurant happened to be owned by the Beast Girl. The Beast Girl was concerned. Where's Broxton? She learned he'd gone east to compete. The Beast Girl couldn't hide her disappointment. Lynette asked Anjia when she became a pugilist. It turns out she's been here ever since the male lead became an adventurer. Because of certain hardships, she has to keep winning until she gets qualified for the King of Fighters tournament. Seeing that the male lead also intends to participate in this year's tournament, Anjia sighed helplessly. Although she admits he's ridiculously strong, it's impossible for him to participate this year, simply because he needs to qualify. He must win over 40 matches during the 6-month preliminary round. Because the fights between gladiators are extremely intense, usually fighting 10 matches a month is already the limit. And now there's only 1 week left in the preliminary round. Winning 40 matches in a week is physically impossible. But unexpectedly, for the male protagonist, fighting 10 matches a day is a piece of cake. He has already applied to fight 40 matches in 4 days. Don't always defy common sense, okay? On the day of the competition, the staff warned him that his opponent was rumored to be using illegal weapons. However, no evidence was found during the body search. Sure enough, the protagonist's opponent was a pervert. Seeing that the protagonist seemed determined, the opponent wondered why he was competing at such an old age. He was deemed worthy of destruction, so he secretly took out the impact stone hidden in the sole of his shoe. She pretends it's too hot and takes off her clothes. Then, taking the male lead by surprise, she throws her clothes to obstruct his view. Seeing the impact stone fall to the ground, the male lead naturally assumes that a flimsy thing like that would break on impact. Little does he know, she used something capable of shattering even rock. The tables turn. This time, the male lead uses the second of the 8 wonders, the empty fist. He uses the shockwave from his brushing past punch to jolt his opponent's head, thus causing the opponent to fall into a coma. This is the worst criticism the twin-tailed girl has ever received. It's all because the male lead needs to win 40 matches in 4 days. He has to run across dozens of preliminary match venues nationwide. And the next match is about to begin, dozens of kilometers away. Anjia is speechless. Even a carriage wouldn't make it in time. I don't have time to take a carriage. Time is pressing. Of course I'm running. Why am I the one being criticized? Having said that, the male lead disappeared from sight. Lynette noticed her interest in the male lead's match, so she transformed into a human rickshaw, carrying Anjia and hurrying on their way. However, because there were too many people on the ground, they had to go on the rooftops. Only after the male lead finished the match did they discover that Anjia was too carsick to watch the match at all. The male lead sighed. His water-letting skill needed to be expanded to the size of the Pacific Ocean. Otherwise, I might accidentally knock my opponent head over heels. Anjia would never have dreamed that someone could actually win 40 matches in 4 days. Next is the regional league. Luckily, she and the male lead aren't in the same region. But as long as he's there, it's simply impossible. Learning that another S-class adventurer who also trains the male lead will participate, Anjia has completely given up on vying for the championship from these monsters. But even if winning is impossible, she will still defeat that man. Seeing Lynette's curiosity about who that man is, Anjia immediately changes the subject. Where's the male lead? Right now, he's jogging for exercise. His destination is 300 kilometers away. Anjia says she wouldn't even be surprised anymore. She's even more impressed that Lynette can keep up with the male lead. In case someone misunderstands that they are a couple, I imagine Lister would also be upset about it. However, unexpectedly, she doesn't mind at all. This is because she also has feelings for the male lead. Suddenly, the store clerk, due to a shortage of staff, requests if the two ladies could help out. On the other side, as soon as the male lead returns, he happens to run into a Dragonman Snape. The other party claims to be the president of the Western League Operations Committee. The male lead, as the fastest ever to pass the Western League preliminaries, had long become a well-known figure. Seeing Snape's report that Angelique hadn't been seen, the male lead was curious that he knew Angelique too. He explained that he was a merchant, who had always been taken care of by Angelique's family. But the male lead discovered that he seemed to have been a boxer before. He could feel it from the touch of their handshake. He looks like someone who's trained specifically for combat. Apparently, he won a small tournament over 20 years ago. He retired at only 23. But this year, his trading company will also be sending a competitor. Before they parted, Snape's eyes suddenly sharpened. He asked the male protagonist to give a message to Angia, to be sure to take care of herself and not overdo things. The Beast Girl was worried when the male protagonist returned. It's just that, although Snape seems like a gentleman, there are rumors he's connected to the underworld. This year, he unusually became the main sponsor of the competition. Meanwhile, Angia is working as a bunny girl, shouting. Although she denies it, Lynette wouldn't have worn this if she hadn't agreed to it. Meanwhile, a drunkard is harassing other bunny girls, taking advantage of his intoxication. Even Angia wasn't spared, but unexpectedly, the other person found nothing in front of Angia. Disappointed, it's just flat. Angia was very unhappy afterwards. The male lead's reaction to their outfits was vastly different. It only improved after both the male lead and Lynette said she was cute. The male lead suddenly remembered that Snape seemed to be looking for her yesterday. Angia's attitude quickly turned cold upon hearing this. Even her fighting style has lost its usual flair. She no longer displays her usual elegance after victory. She's always breathless after each fight. In contrast, the male lead's water release 8 styles are becoming increasingly proficient. Soon, only 4 matches remain in their competition. To ensure participation in the championship, she can't afford to lose a single match. But Angia's opponent today is different from before. Although Angia has incorporated magic into her usual hit-and-run tactics, but the opponent's resilience was better than ever before. And Angia had already consumed a large amount of stamina. Even her speed was slower than at the beginning. Her ultimate move, the instantaneous kick, could no longer effectively target the opponent. Instead, she was caught off guard. With just one punch, Angia was defeated and had no power to fight back. Afterwards, even the male protagonist sensed her emotional anxiety. That opponent was clearly very durable. She must know she's not good at fighting such enemies head-on. Yet she still chose a physically draining tactic, hoping for a quick victory. It's none of your business that Angia is unhappy, but the male lead still kept muttering it all the way. As long as she performs at her usual level, she shouldn't lose. If she has any worries, she can tell me. Although I may not be very reliable myself, Angia is truly exasperated by his goody-two-shoes nature. It turns out the dragon person who was looking for her before was actually her fiancé. Years ago, her parents died in an accident, so the family estate became jointly managed by her siblings. But due to lack of experience, they fell into a financial crisis. At this time, her miserly grandfather interfered without authorization, choosing to cooperate with Snape. And Snape's goal was to establish connections with the nobility. Therefore, she agreed to assist her family with a large sum of money. The condition was that she would be betrothed to Angia. Afterward, although they desperately tried to improve their finances, they still couldn't cancel the engagement in time. In any case, to stop the engagement, she investigated Snape in advance. She found out that he was the main sponsor of this competition. His goal was to use his position as a sponsor to cause trouble. At this moment, there was a commotion in the tavern nearby. A red dragonkin is causing trouble inside. The older brother who defeated Angia earlier in the day tries to stop it, but unexpectedly, he is knocked down by the red dragonkin with a single blow. The dragonkin tears the woman's clothes in his hand. He forces her to do something bad with him to calm down. Although Angia is scared, she still steps forward. She demands the dragonkin let go of the woman. At this moment, Snape finally arrives. Seeing the red dragon person appear, he withdrew and left. Snape apologized and promised to compensate for the losses. It's because that dragon person is his younger brother. His younger brother has a bad temper. Even if it's only to the extent of being bothered by a fly, he will fly into a rage. Because he is powerful, Snape could do nothing about it. After confirming that Angie was fine, Snape could also rest easy. After all, her body is quite precious. The storm subsided, and the male lead curiously asked, "What does Snape becoming a sponsor have to do with her engagement?" It's simply because the dowry from their engagement is a huge sum. According to Angia's investigation, the Dragon Clan Commerce Guild simply couldn't afford it. So the other party must be trying to earn funds through this competition. and there's a huge flow of gambling money in the championship. The male lead also realized that this old geezer was planning to rig the match. The opponent plans to use the sponsorship spot for a fixed match, so Anjia wants to eliminate the guild members first. This would cancel out the engagement. However, it just so happens that the guild members are the Red Dragon people from earlier. Anjia knows that even if she advances, she's no match for them. Seeing this, the male lead suggests whether he should train her. The woman never expected that she was just looking for training, but I almost got myself killed by the male lead's training, because the initial training involved pulling a cart with 4 iron balls attached, worn by the male lead, and if I forgot to use strengthening magic, I would die. Angelica cried, not understanding what was going on. Little did she know, this was to familiarize her body with high-speed movement by being pulled by someone faster, a way to prepare her for the speed of the wyvern race in advance. After all, although Angelica excels at acceleration techniques, her movements are not stable enough after accelerating. Anjia begged for mercy, damn it, but the male lead said that only when you reach your limit can you push harder to break through. It only takes 6 hours of training, and it will be over quickly. Finally, when Anjia's feet were burning from running, the male lead stopped. At that moment, she could almost see her great-grandmother waving at her, but luckily, her feet were still intact. She almost thought they had been torn off already. However, the male lead thought she was already very strong. I had already lost consciousness when Lynette pulled me. If I remember correctly, I died 3 times on the first day. Anjia was happy to have finally survived the first day of training, but it turned out that was only the first half. Decisive Anjia simply gave up. She hid in a secluded restaurant to enjoy delicious food. After all, escaping is shameful, but it works. But the male lead found her in only 15 minutes. Anjia thought she would be scolded, but the fact is just the opposite. As someone who has been there, the male protagonist understands her mood very well. He also escaped dozens of times during the 2.5 years he was in training. What we met instead was tens of thousands of deaths, but he is saved by Broxton every time. As long as I have Alice as my power bank, Broxton is not afraid of not having the magic power to resurrect him. Although he had considered giving up, Broxton told him that the regret of giving up would be worse than the pain he was feeling now. Which would he choose? In the end, the protagonist chose to continue with the training, although Broxton promised that if he gave up, he would let him leave without hesitation. When Anjia heard this, she also opened up. In fact, she really disliked the formalities of the nobility. She never liked the aristocratic education she received. If she could, she wanted to shed the label of a noblewoman. She wanted to contribute to her family as a warrior. That's why she wanted to become the first female top-ranked knight in history. Brave Anjia is not afraid of difficulties. Anjia no longer avoids and continues to undergo hellish training. Because Anjia's fighting style incorporates the knight's swordsmanship, she becomes stronger with a sword. But the rules of fist fighting state that combat must be unarmed. The best technique is to turn unarmed hands into swords. Therefore, Lynette will be a special instructor to help with training. Finally, Anjia welcomes the final match of the regional tournament. Her opponent, like her, also has 7 wins and 1 loss. But Anjia has already lost her usual elegance. As the match officially begins, Anjia unleashes a violent blow, instantly defeating her opponent. But she still hasn't recovered from her excitement. After the match, Alice and Mitt also came to watch. Earlier, they went to the Empire to investigate the rumors of the Infinite Jewel. It turned out to be just a rumor, a wasted trip. Mitt's lecherous nature remained unchanged. Seeing the cute beast girl, he unconsciously wanted to cuddle. Meanwhile, Broxton also finished his match and came to assemble. Seeing the beast girl's liking for Broxton, Mitt was completely dumbfounded. At that moment, he realized the male lead and Broxton planned to win the tournament and obtain the soul gem. Alice became interested and wanted to participate, but the male lead immediately refused her, saying otherwise, the venue wouldn't be safe. Broxton also knew that Angelica had entered the final tournament. Although the male lead and Lynette had helped her train a lot, several times she thought she would die. The hero praised her for being much more talented than him, so she learned very quickly. It's a pity that the time is still far from enough. But practice will not betray you, even if the time is short. As long as you train hard, you will be rewarded. Lynette believes she is absolutely fine. Soon the final tournament finally begins. After drawing lots, a pair of duels. The male lead is relieved he doesn't have to face Broxton before the finals. If he drew Broxton, he'd have to forfeit early. Angie realizes that before the finals, Keith won't encounter strong opponents like Calvin or Broxton. It's highly likely the match fixing started from the first round. Snape probably wanted to initially impress the audience with Keith's strength, then find an opportunity to bet on opponents with increased odds. As long as Keith intentionally loses that match, the Chamber of Commerce behind him will make a killing. Therefore, his opponent absolutely cannot be too strong. Angia will also meet him in the second match. She will sabotage the competition then. The male lead wondered what would happen if the draw resulted in him not meeting his opponent until the finals. Then the male lead encountered boxing champion Kelvin again. The coach seemed to see the Kelvin of the past in their eyes. Back then, Kelvin was arrogant and full of himself. He thought he could easily defeat the top 4 players from that year. But unexpectedly, he suffered his first crushing defeat in life. Yet even so, he still displayed extraordinary talent. With enough training, he would undoubtedly become a dazzling player. The first defeat seemed to change him, because once he loses to a stronger opponent, he will intensify his training until he wins. This cycle finally led to Kelvin's debut. He completely suppressed the previous champion and became the new boxing king. In the first match, Keith's opponent struck first, but the blow didn't hurt Keith at all. Instead, with a casual swipe, Keith could stir up a strong wind. As long as he avoided being hit, everything would be fine. Keith defeated his opponent with a single strike. Although the protagonist found Keith strange, he clearly possessed great strength and physical resilience. His movements were completely unprofessional. But regardless, this match was impressive enough. Unsurprisingly, there were no surprises. The main characters all successfully advanced to the next round. The final match featured Kelvin's grand entrance. His opponent was knocked away with one punch from Kelvin as soon as he moved. Although it seemed very fast, it was more like he had mastered the overall situation. Roston believed he had perfected the unique sense of smell of the canine tribe. As a result, he could turn everything into a flavor, including changes in brain waves or adrenaline levels. There was no doubt that he was an excellent fighter. But as soon as he finished speaking, Kelvin was knocked down by a single punch. Only a few S-rank adventurers noticed something was off. It seemed that Kelvin had deliberately allowed himself to be hit. As Kelvin fell, cheers erupted from the stands. Then Kelvin finished the fight with one move. The next day, it was finally Angia's turn to face Keith. But Snape suddenly appeared beside her, politely greeting her. However, Alice is no ordinary child. She wondered why he was putting on such a fake show. She directly made him sweat profusely. Before the match, Keith met Angia and said, "Bro, I don't want to affect the wedding, so you can't hit me in the face." Angia doesn't care. She'll soon show him the results of her hard work. Keith acts like a show-off. She trains like a fool. Yet she still can't compare to him, who spends his days eating, drinking, and playing. However, Angia instantly sees through his lie. He couldn't have his current physique without training. Keith denies training, even a little. He claims it's because he's a genius. He wants Angia to give birth to several more little dragons. He promised he wouldn't attack Angia's stomach. Angia couldn't hold it back anymore and wanted to fight. But then Angia realized that her usual methods were completely ineffective. So Angia actively deactivated her enhanced magic. Next was the moment to witness the results of her training. This girl with twin tails never imagined after a month of hellish training, she finally mastered the S-rank adventurer's ultimate technique, the blade finger. But he could only cut a small part of the skin of Kai's, the dragonkin. What he didn't know was that Kai's was the strongest genius of the dragonkin in 100 years. No matter what skill it was, he could learn it after seeing it a few times. But soon, Kai's lost patience with Angia. Kai's kept smashing the ground, sending dust into the air, covering the arena. Then, without a sound, he appeared behind Angia. By the time Angia noticed, he had already been sent flying by Kai's. Facing Angia's signature move, instant kick, Kiss just learned it after watching a few times. The absolute difference in strength left Angia completely defenseless. Snape explained that Kiss is the strongest genius of the dragon people. Shortly after he won the martial arts championship, he first met Kiss, who was only 8 years old at the time. He was beaten to a pulp by Kiss. This led him to decide to retire and go into business. Because Kiss possesses all the perfect elements needed for battle. He is the perfect warrior of the dragonkin. Keys, relying on his talent, mocks Angie unscrupulously. If you want to hate her parents for giving birth to such an incompetent person. He deliberately rubs salt in the wound. Her parents are already dead. So, trash only begets trash. Off-field, Snape knows that Angie suspects him of match-fixing. But he never even considered using such petty tactics. After all, no one would initially believe that an unknown athlete sponsored by a company could actually win the championship. So at the beginning of the match, when the odds were highest, he placed a huge bet on Keith winning. At this moment, the audience fell silent. Because Keith was brutally beating Angie. Seeing that Angie still didn't intend to give up, Keith insisted on forcing her to submit publicly, to acknowledge the reality that trash can't beat genius. But for the dream she had been pursuing since childhood, Angia struggled to continue punching. This truly ignited Keith's killing intent. Only after Angia completely lost consciousness, did the referee declare Keith the victor. However, Keith wasn't satisfied. At the moment of his strike, he was interfered with from outside the ring. The male protagonist, rarely, entered a state of anger. Afterwards, Keith sought revenge on the male protagonist. He planned to incapacitate him before he even got on the stage. But unexpectedly, the male lead nonchalantly dodged Keith's attack and calmly put on his shoes. Taking him down here is pointless. He needs to avenge Angie. And he'll give Keith a good beating in front of the audience. It's just too bad for the male lead's next opponent. He's got really bad luck. This time, the male lead didn't use his 8 amazing techniques to hold back. Instead, he unexpectedly knocked his opponent out with a single blow. Then the male lead was told that Angia was seriously injured. She'll probably have to be bedridden for 2.5 months. But thankfully, her life is not in danger. He could understand that she must be very frustrated. She had relentlessly undergone grueling training, and she wasn't willing to give up her life attitude and dreams. Meanwhile, the competition continued. Broxton displayed violent aesthetics. With a single blow, he eliminated his opponent. The list of the 4 finalists was quickly revealed. Unexpectedly, Angia could suddenly walk again. I guessed it was Broxton who helped. He told her to be more careful. After all, the recovery from sacred magic can give one the illusion of a complete cure. But the accumulated damage and fatigue still remain. Angia apologized for disappointing him. Clearly, he gets no benefit, yet he still kindly spends time training himself. Since childhood, Angia has understood that feminism is not about fists. Therefore, she hates the obligations imposed on noblewomen. That's why she wants to forge her own path through martial arts. Now, her mentality has been shattered by Keith. Perhaps obediently marrying Snape isn't a bad thing. Maybe she could live a comfortable life then. The male lead knows she's lying, and he thinks he's the one who should apologize. No one can deny Angia's efforts. He just didn't see Keith's true strength. But in this match, he will show Angia the future of continued cultivation. It's a twist of fate. The male lead is matched against Keith in this round. But Keith is still mouthing off, apologizing to Angia. If he hadn't messed up yesterday, Angia wouldn't have to live a miserable life anymore, agonizing over her lack of talent, and arrogantly urged the male lead to make his move. He wanted to see what kind of garbage results the trash male lead could produce. Kiss didn't expect the slap in the face to come so quickly. The male lead counterattacked, and he, a genius, would actually kneel before a mortal. Seeing him so pathetic, he felt embarrassed to continue fighting. Kiss stubbornly insisted that it was just the male lead's luck. But the male lead once again easily dodged Kiss's punch. With a backhand strike, he touched Keith's stomach, causing him to vomit blood. Angia was shocked by the male lead's strength. He could actually injure that steel-like body. Little did she know, the male lead had barely used any brute force. That was a type of body control technique. It could penetrate the surface and directly impact the internal organs. Even the perfect will be unable to withstand this move. Kiss, enraged and humiliated, used the Dragon Clan's unique strengthening magic. As a result, the male lead quickly fell into a disadvantage. But Broxton noticed that this move consumes a lot of magic power. However, Kiss had never trained his magic power. Those who are flooded drown, those who are dry starve. The male lead was incredibly envious of his innate magical power. But when he tried to use his piercing attack again, he realized it was ineffective. The male lead looked extremely worn out at one point. Snape considered this a natural outcome. Broxton regretted that he was wrong. Because for the male lead, the opinions of others didn't matter. What the male lead truly cared about was Angie's thoughts on the match. Under constant attacks, Keith soon started gasping for breath. On the contrary, the male lead only looked worn out, but he didn't even get a scratch. It's because this is also a body control technique. It can disperse the attacks within the body. In simple terms, the male protagonist didn't take any damage at all. He admits that he had been holding back, and deliberately limited his physical abilities to match Angia's. Only the initial punch was full of emotion, without any technique. For the male protagonist, winning this match no longer matters. He wants Angia to see his potential. So this match is basically a rematch between Angie and Keith. The male lead is speechless. Keith is just a brute. He doesn't understand anything. He just fights on instinct. Snape is incredulous. He thought the male lead had a talent surpassing Keith's. But he's met with 4 consecutive denials from his companions. That's truly impossible. He's just an ordinary person among ordinary people. What nonsense is the old man spouting? He doesn't have an ounce of talent. Just how untalented do you have to be talked about like this? Others don't even know. The male lead actually missed the best age to train his magical power. His foundation is arguably worse than a normal person's. As for why he possesses the power to suppress Kiss, Angia surely knows the reason. Since he was young, relying on his natural talent, Kiss has never known defeat. He's never experienced any training. Naturally, he doesn't know how to fight when fatigued. He can't maintain the precision of his techniques. Truly hardworking people, no matter how tired they are, will continue training until they can't move. Only the strength gained that way truly belongs to them. It's true that Kiss is incredibly strong just relying on his natural abilities, but among geniuses, he's just a beginner. Even among the top-tier geniuses who have undergone rigorous training, he's simply not enough. The reason Keith can be so arrogant and disdainful is simply because he's only ever encountered opponents he could defeat. To the world, he's just a lizard in a well. Enraged, Keith awakens the Dragonkin's ultimate strengthening magic. He awakens a portion of his dormant bloodline power. His form is now infinitely close to that of a true dragon. The protagonist's punches feel like they're hitting solid steel. Not only that, but even his speed has been further improved. The male lead side, this kind of talent is truly unfair. He knew that Angia couldn't possibly defeat Keith at this moment, but that doesn't mean Angia can never win. Angia could tell that the male lead was still using her instant footwork moves, because that was the strength she achieved after a year of hellish training, since ordinary effort can't overcome the gap in talent. Then, through effort beyond reason, he continued his training. At this point, Keith had fallen into a desperate situation. To break through the crisis, he needed the willpower to fight to the death. But that was precisely the kind of behavior Keith had always looked down upon. This man simply couldn't understand. In order to sell tickets, he had hidden his true strength for 2.5 years. Now, he had finally decided to unleash the battle power of an S-rank fighter. Yet, unexpectedly, he encountered an even more monstrous opponent. The story continues from the last episode. The male protagonist simulates by Jia's strength a year later. He overwhelmingly defeats the Dragon Man, Kiss, advancing to the finals. However, Angia discovers that Snape appears quite calm. He confesses that he might also want to see Kiss's defeat. After all, Kiss, relying solely on his natural talent, ruined his pugilist career. So, seeing Kiss's defeat, he doesn't seem to mind. The only regret is that I can't marry Angel as my wife. The next match is Kelvin versus Broston. Kelvin can clearly sense Broston's strength. Even just standing there, Broston is flawless. Kelvin takes the first move with a rapid punch combination to test him. Broston casually waves his hand, creating a shockwave that stuns the crowd. There's no doubt he's the strongest opponent Kelvin has ever faced. Unexpectedly, Keith suddenly returns to the audience. Because of the awakening of ancient bloodline power just now, I lost control. I'm currently wreaking havoc in the crowd. Kelvin is annoyed that the battle was disrupted. The male protagonists group can confirm that they can instantly kill Keith, who is at the peak of A-class. This shows that Kelvin has entered the S-class realm. But due to Keith's interference, today's match can only be temporarily suspended. Kelvin is helpless. It's rare to be in such good shape today. However, Broxton noticed his fists seemed lost. At the dinner table, Angia wondered why the male lead wasn't there. It was simply because he had gone out to exercise again. This round trip would cover 700 kilometers. Angia was already used to this. Meanwhile, the male lead unexpectedly discovered a large hill nearby. Tilting his head to look, it resembled Lynette. A sudden roar came from the front. It turns out Kelvin is also training here. Due to the interruption of the match, he didn't get to fully enjoy it earlier. Now, he can have a proper spar with the protagonist. As soon as they clashed, the protagonist realized that Kelvin could dodge his punches. It didn't make sense for him to have been hit by someone of that level earlier. Kelvin thought the protagonist's skill should allow him to understand this. For him, a man from the slums, fighting was the greatest pleasure. Unknowingly, he became unbeatable in the slums. Later, he came to this arena nation and had smooth sailing. He easily won the championship that year. Only then did he realize that it was just a job of constantly winning. Although he found it equally boring here, seeing Nico happy, he thought it wasn't bad. But the battles in the arena no longer excite him. The only thing he can do is to keep getting stronger. Until he heard someone complain because he always knocks out his opponents with one blow, leading to a gradual decline in audience interest. The overall popularity of the matches is also declining. Even Nico's training ground is struggling to stay open. Nico doesn't care. That can't allow Kelvin to throw the match. But Kelvin didn't want to cause trouble for Nico. So in the following fights, he deliberately underperformed. He constantly played the role of a fighter whose performance fluctuated, all to hype up the atmosphere of the match. And he achieved a three-peat with little difficulty. Because of this, he couldn't fight at full strength. As long as he continued to hype up the match atmosphere and attract viewers with his underperformance tactic, the training grounds business will also be more prosperous. Having said that, the male lead suddenly looked unwell. He won't be able to say those words tomorrow. The next day, Kelvin and Broxton fought again. For safety reasons, a magical barrier had been placed around the audience seating area. As the match was officially announced to begin, Kelvin immediately used his ultimate move, the Spiral Fang Fist. This move relies on high-speed rotation of the arm to increase its power. Even Broxton's blocks were deflected, which speaks volumes. However, Broxton still knew that Kelvin hadn't used his full strength. He understood that it was for the audience present that he had to limit his strength in battle. Kelvin didn't deny it. It was simply because Broxton was too strong. Therefore, if he used his full strength, he would expose his previous holding back. I thought Broxton would definitely disdain him for deceiving the audience. But Kelvin prioritized giving the audience a good show over himself. He unexpectedly earned Broxton's approval. It's a shame he can't fight at full strength. But to be fair, from now on, he'll only use 2 fingers and won't move another step. That's it. Whenever Kelvin is on the defensive, the audience erupts in enthusiastic cheers. Kelvin is in a difficult position. While fighting his hardest is certainly exhilarating, it would also be a shame to miss the chance to fight a strong opponent. Nico suddenly shouts, calling him an idiot. He sees that Kelvin is only pretending to fight with all his might, but has forgotten what he's fighting for. Nico's dream is to cultivate the strongest fighter in history. For this, he's willing to stake his life. I only hope Kelvin can become the strongest. At this moment, Kelvin was scolded awake by Nico. He finally decided to stop hiding his strength. The long-lost excitement made him ecstatic. Facing Kelvin's all-out attack, Broxton also used corresponding power to defend. However, the audience did spot something unusual. They knew Kelvin had been deceiving them all along. But he wasn't affected by outside influences at this moment. Since he'd started, he'd do it thoroughly. He started with a 5th-order spell, Shocking Anjia. Logically, the dogmen race aren't supposed to be good at magic. Yet Kelvin was skilled in both magic and martial arts. It must be the result of years of training that surpassed his limits. He had exceptional physical abilities and talent. Add to that the power and skill honed over the past 2 days. He's a genius who is comparable to other S-rank seniors. But as Kelvin showed more and more strength, the male protagonist became increasingly worried about him. Now Kelvin is planning to use his strongest 8th-order magic. The sky changed color, as if it were the end of the world. The male protagonist covered his head with his hands, terrified. It's because Kelvin is far stronger than he imagined. At this rate, Broxton won't hold back anymore. In response to Kelvin's belief, Broxton gave him a thumbs up. It was a gesture that appears during combat among orcs. It signifies a declaration to engage in close combat with abandon and defense. In other words, he was about to go all out in his attack. Kelvin's expression changed dramatically. At this moment, he experienced fear for the first time in his life. Broxton's punches were far faster than he could perceive. The shockwaves alone from his punches rendered him helpless. Faced with Broxton's relentless assault, all he could do was unleash various high-level magic attacks. But the other man didn't even blink. Broxton flashed forward, landed another punch, and sent Kelvin flying. The protagonist noticed at the instant he was hit. Kelvin used several methods to mitigate the damage. But even so, the bones and internal organs in his body were badly injured. Kelvin, however, wasn't planning to give up. After all, this was the battle opportunity he had always dreamed of. Even if his magic was depleted, he still had physical strength left. But with his body heavily wounded, even Kelvin's body couldn't hold up for much longer. The spectators outside the arena were influenced by Kelvin. Cheering and shouting of encouragement rose again. Kelvin struggled to his feet, wanting to fight again. Since he had no magic or strength left, even if it meant burning his soul, he wanted to throw one more punch. It's a pity that he was facing Broxton. The classic smoke without injury appeared again. To pay the highest respect to Kelvin, Broxton showed no mercy, directly hitting him in the face and defeating him, successfully meeting the male protagonist in the finals. The male lead never imagined that the orc master who trained him for 2.5 years, a man who could single-handedly demolish an arena with one punch, would actually hope to fight him in the finals. Even knowing he could be resurrected after being killed, the 2.5 years of hellish training had already inflicted psychological trauma on him. Even knowing he could be resurrected after death, the fear of death still terrified him. The elf brings up the first meeting with the protagonist 2.5 years ago. Broxton immediately set up a 2.5-year training plan. The protagonist thought it was to cultivate a partner who could defeat Caesar. Little did he know, Broxton also wanted to cultivate an opponent who could fight him on equal terms. Since orcs have a habit of fighting others, they use it to understand each other. But Broxton was just too strong. He had never encountered anyone capable of fighting him on equal terms. So this has been his dream all along. Tomorrow might be the day Broxton's dream comes true. Although it is the male protagonist's freedom to abstain or not. But the elf hopes that he can also understand Broxton's mood. The hero recalled 2.5 years ago Broxton meets the hero for the first time. I know from the handshake that the male protagonist has no martial arts experience. Magic power is also the lowest level. It can be said that he has no talent or ability to become an adventurer at all. The protagonist is disappointed, thinking he is just like everyone else. He thinks that by saying this, they're trying to make him give up on his dream. But unexpectedly, the other person didn't mean that at all. What he meant was that the protagonist must endure hundreds of times more training than those with talent. At this moment, Angia is extremely disappointed in the protagonist. The S-class companions, however, can somewhat understand the protagonist's hesitation. After all, Broston's training is akin to a hell on earth. It's good that the male lead didn't have a mental breakdown, although he had a few breakdowns before. It's incredible that he managed to pull through. Angia thought it was because he switched careers in his 50s. Little did she know, the male lead actually possesses an innate skill. It's just that the activation conditions are a bit troublesome. While the male lead can't control this power, it also puts an immense strain on his body, so Broxton forbade him from using it. The male lead thought Lynette must think he was useless. Little did he know, no matter what he chose, Lynette would like him. But if he could fight Broxton for her, even if he was afraid, Lynette would like him even more. That's all there is to it. The male lead has no reason not to give it his all now. The next day, the male lead acts cool, saying he's already let go. He's going to use everything he's learned so far. At this moment, the host says, the champion today will not only win her over, but also the 3 little targets behind her, as well as the prize money. They'll also receive 100 kilograms of magic stones and a year's supply of golden slime punching bags, as well as a luxury couple's hot spring travel voucher. Lynette saw this and used her charm on the male lead. As expected, desire was the primary driving force. Afterward, Angia was shocked. She had no idea what Lynette had said. At this moment, the male lead's eyes showed no sign of hesitation. Broston hoped the male lead would use the things he taught him over the past 2.5 years to strike back. And the match officially began. The male lead starts with an enhanced version of Angia's lightning kick. The clash sends fragments of rock flying towards the defensive barrier of the stands. The powerful impact shakes the arena violently. Broston's arm, rarely seen, is bleeding. The dragons are stunned, thinking it's some unknown magic. But unexpectedly, neither of them used magic just now. It was just a hand-to-hand combat with enhanced physical abilities. In the blink of an eye, dozens of rounds of intense fighting erupted in the arena. Finally, the male protagonist used Lynette's ultimate skill, Line Slash, to successfully wound Broston's arm. Laypeople see the excitement, experts see the skill. It's precisely because she received special training from the male protagonist that Angia understands how difficult it is to reach his level. Angia is curious about what Lynette said to the male protagonist just now. She learned that Lynette expressed her desire to go on a hot spring trip with him for some quality time together. Angia reacted just as uneasily as the male lead. After all, a hot spring trip means staying overnight. In other words, they're going to, you know. Seeing Lynette so calm, Angia could only maintain a composed appearance and pretend nothing happened. However, although the male lead's attack was fierce, it had almost no effect on Brothers. Since the male lead finally agreed to fight him, to show his sincerity, he decided to stop playing defensively. The male protagonist appeared calm on the surface, but inside he was already extremely nervous. He knew that against an opponent like Broxton, simply relying on momentum and blindly charging forward would only lead to his death. Then Broxton launched a flurry of punches. The male protagonist continuously dodged left and right, narrowly avoiding them. Little did he know that the barrage of punches was merely a trap. Broxton's true intention was to get into close combat. Angia worriedly stood up instinctively. Lynette, however, remained perfectly steady, reassuring Angia. The male lead, at the moment the fist arrived, used the beginner-level magic, Air Cushion, in time. But the problem wasn't that he could avoid Broxton's attack, but that the male lead didn't gather any magical power before instantly casting it. He didn't even chant the spell's name. It was an ultra-rare instance of completely chantless spellcasting. This level of magical control precision, even someone as strong as Broston couldn't achieve it. He owes this achievement most to Alice. Because during his magic training, any mistake in control would result in Alice's magical punishment. If he was lucky, only half his body would be vaporized. In battle, he suddenly chose to meet the attack head-on. But to avoid Broston's attack, the male lead was forced into the air, only to become Broxton's target. Unexpectedly, he cleverly used his feet to unleash magic, directly borrowing force from thin air to arrive above the arena and unleash a powerful attack. Unsurprisingly, there were no surprises this time. The classic smoky, unharmed scene appeared again. This is the battle between S-class fighters, a breathtaking series of attacks and defenses. His tactics and power are monstrous, far beyond the capabilities of ordinary people. But the protagonist reflects that his last attack lacked power due to the distance. He must find an opportunity to close in and attack. Broxton, however, is pleased with the protagonist's progress. He believes that while his training plan for the protagonist is perfect, it wouldn't have been successful without the protagonist's perseverance. Broxton never minces words. Therefore, the protagonist is also happy to receive his approval. But this is just a conversation between master and apprentice. He frankly admitted that he already knew Broxton's purpose in training him, and Broxton's dream. Broxton felt helpless about his companions. He told the protagonist not to worry too much, saying it's a dream is too exaggerated. If it comes true, it will only be considered a pleasant surprise. But since the protagonist knew, he wanted to repay the favor. Since Broxton holds him in high regard in battle, the protagonist also wants to respond with the same respect. This orc had noticed from a young age that he was different from his kin. He could quickly understand the written words in human books. Orcs would exchange opinions with each other, but he was simply too strong to feel anything from it. To improve the lives of his people, he taught them human knowledge. Unknowingly, he was worshipped as a deity by his kin. Even his family dared not approach him anymore. From then on, he became utterly alone. During a severe storm, he briefly left his shelter, and his entire tribe perished in a mudslide. But he felt no sadness at the loss of his tribe and family. He only felt his loneliness more deeply than before, until a human adventurer suddenly ambushed him. At a single glance, the adventurer discovered Brossan wasn't just reading a book. He also had wyverns attacking the town beside him. They were originally hired to exterminate the orcs, but Brossan clearly wasn't the type who needed exterminating. After talking, the adventurers learned about Brossan's solitary life, so they invited him to join them in pursuing their unrealized dreams. It turned out they had once fought alongside the hero Yamato. Now they were known as the Legendary Five. Broxton also read Legend of Yamato. Little did he know that he was the author of that book. Therefore, the man's dream was to defeat Caesar from the story. Seeing this, Broxton agreed to join. Together, they founded the strongest adventurer team of today. During that time, other equally strong individuals gradually gathered. But the orc fights Broxton had hoped for never materialized. That's why he came up with his own training plan to cultivate opponents. He thought this would never be possible, until the male lead appeared and gave him a glimmer of hope. Thinking back to the past 2.5 years, when his orc master stayed by his side, never leaving him, helping him with his training, the male lead knew he should repay this kindness. So, he did what any orc would do, gave a big thumbs up. This meant he would forego defense and have an intense battle with his orc master. The only thing he felt guilty about was that he wouldn't be able to take Lynette to the hot springs. Little did he know, Lynette liked him just the way he was. Broxton knew words were unnecessary at this moment. 1,000 words were contained within his fists, but both of their powers were too immense. The surrounding protective barrier couldn't withstand it. The dwarves and elves, having no choice, had to borrow Alice's magic. They used large-scale sacred magic to envelop the arena. In an instant, except for those with considerable strength, everyone else in the arena was moved outside to safety. The two men in the ring are locked in a fierce, close-quarters battle. Although the protagonist's punches are faster, landing more blows on Broxton, Broxton's punches pack far more power. While the protagonist can land his hits, Broxton endures the attacks and counters, sending the protagonist flying. The protagonist is unwilling to let the fight end so anticlimactically. From his perspective, though, he fought well. But Broxton was still standing unharmed in the arena. Angia thought the battle should have ended there. Little did she know, the male protagonist hadn't shown his true strength yet. The male protagonist understood that his previous performance wasn't a fair fight for Broxton. He wanted to repay his kindness, and this wasn't enough. His strong resolve helped him successfully activate his inherent skill, Brave Awakening. The S-rankers in the stands weren't surprised at all. It was because they had secretly given the male protagonist special training, without Broxton's knowledge. Now the protagonist has reached a certain level of control. He also knows the conditions for activating his skill. It is when the protagonist faces a powerful enemy far beyond his own strength and resolves to push his limits and challenge the opponent. Therefore, the activation conditions are unrelated to magic or physical strength, but to personal willpower. The real battle is only just beginning. Broxton suddenly realizes. Before, he was always confined to the form of mutual fighting, but he has a group of reliable companions who care about him. He's no longer alone. Both of them have reached their physical limits. The winner will be decided in the next clash. The main character is the first to falter. He admits that he's only this capable. However, Broxton believes he can help him achieve his dreams. He was able to fight to this point, so he won. 3 days later, the male lead woke up from his coma only to find the boxing champion's belt in his possession. It was only because Broxton refused to yield. The victor of that duel was the male lead. The male lead didn't become proud or complacent because of it. He knew that as long as Broxton was willing, he could have instantly recovered full health with his skills at that time. In short, everyone's objective this time was successfully accomplished. The second Infinity Heart Gem is finally in hand. We're one step closer to defeating Caesar. To avoid suspicion, Lynette took out a similar substitute. As long as Alice infuses it with magic, it'll be difficult to detect that it's been switched. At this point, the male lead finally became curious. How old is Reinhard this year, exactly? After all, more than 200 years have passed since the release of Yamato Legend. Little did I know, the opponent's actual age remains unknown. And his survival to this day relies entirely on his innate skill of immortality.